Good morning, everyone. Sorry the sessions got delayed. I think the keynote is still going on, but since there's so many of you here, I wanted to get started. So, great. How many of you are current AWS customers? All right, great. How many of you are using the GovCloud region today? All right, fantastic. So this session is about the GovCloud region. We have, AWS has a global infrastructure with 11 regions to kind of context sent to. And the GovCloud region is one of our regions in the cloud. It's on the Pacific Northwest. And sorry, and we have thousands of government agencies and educational institutions using the AWS cloud. Today, we're here to talk about the GovCloud region, what it's about, give you a sense of who has access, and the uniqueness of the GovCloud region. So it's an isolated region in the AWS cloud, and what that means is the data is isolated from all other AWS regions, the network is isolated, and the machines are all isolated. And one of the things that makes it unique is it's got a separate authentication stack from all other AWS regions, so completely isolated. And it's managed by US persons on US soil. So AWS manages the GovCloud region completely by US persons within our company inside. And I want to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're going, the history of innovation. You know, AWS region started in 2006. The GovCloud region was built in 2011. And we started with basic services like compute and storage, IAM, and EBS. And then in 2012, we innovated by adding more services that helped you grow as you started innovating on the platform. So RDS, Relational Database Service, SQS, SNS, auto-scaling, and I'm having technical difficulties because there's no display here. Elastic load balancing, auto-scaling, and command line interface. So as you started innovating in the GovCloud region, we did as well. In 2013, we added Simple Workflow Service and DynamoDB, EMR, so you could do big data processing, and we added the management console. So started to give you more services as our customers started using more features in the region. In 2014, we added Redshift and CloudTrail. CloudTrail is the service that, if you don't know, allows you to see who's made API calls when, with what parameters, and every GovCloud account is automatically CloudTrail enabled. So when you get your account, CloudTrail is turned on, and auditing already happens right from the beginning. We added VPC peering, more instance types, our second generation of instance types, Glacier, and a way to import your VMs into the region, and then a service health dashboard. Oops, I'm sorry. All right. And then what we've done so far in 2015 is we've completed the database suite of services. So we added Elasticache, and we added S3 lifecycle management. So now your objects in S3 can lifecycle manage, can be pushed up into Glacier based on retention policies and archival policies. We added the export capability, and a huge ask by our customers was key management service and integrated with all the other services, so EBS, RDS, S3, Redshift, and EMR. So that's kind of our pace of innovation, and we have more to come this year as well. One of the biggest concerns for our customers is security and compliance. And so it's important to talk about that, I think, today. The AWS, the GovCloud region, addresses our regulated workloads, and it's built for regulated industries. So it's a mandatory VPC region, so it gives you boundary protection. Auditing, like I said, the CloudTrail is enabled. The CloudTrail service is enabled when your accounts are created. And encryption. So we have FIPS 140-2 endpoints and all kinds of encryption services as well. So we talked about Amazon or AWS Key Management Service and how it's integrated with the 5 other services. All right, and then what comes after all the security controls that you have in place is the compliance regime. So how to record those, audit those, all the compliance that you have to take care of, and let your security people know how secure your systems are. So you can run ITAR workloads in the GovCloud region. So ITAR compliance says US persons on US soil. It's an export control, cannot take certain data outside the US or let non-US persons see it. We have a FedRAMP agency ATO with Health and Human Services, and it covers IAM, EC2, EBS, VPC, and S3. So IAM, Identity and Access Management, how you get access to the region. EC2 is our compute service. EBS is our block storage, so your disk drives attached to your compute, attached to EC2 instances. VPC is the virtual private cloud, or the boundary protection that you have in the networking space. And then S3 is our object store. In the other AWS regions that are in the United States, there's a FedRAMP package as well, which includes Redshift. Redshift will be part of the GovCloud region. Redshift's in the GovCloud region, but the FedRAMP package will include Redshift as well, just not at this time. And then we have DoD, the cloud security model. There's levels 1 and 2, which are public-facing data, and levels 3 through 5 can be run in the GovCloud region. So that's mission-critical data. Everything up to and including FOUO data, no classified data. I think level 6 is the classified data. Yep. All right, so you're like, that's cool. How do I get in? Right? So requirements for access. You have to be a US person, and you have to be working for an entity that is incorporated to do business in the United States or US entity. And you have to be able to handle export control data. So really, it's kind of in the reverse. If you're not on the barred list for handling export control data, if your organization or you personally aren't, then you are allowed access into the region. Right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about security and how AWS does security, and then where your responsibility is. We have a saying at AWS that security is a shared responsibility. So we are responsible for up to the hypervisor, and you guys are responsible for your applications running in the cloud. The compliance team came up with a nifty new saying, and I want to propagate that through because I think it's really kind of cool. Security of the cloud, so that's what AWS is responsible for, and the key word there is of, right? So AWS is responsible for making sure that we have security on our facilities, gates and guards, badges, multiple ways to make sure that you have access to the room, that you're a US person, all the vetting. So facilities, physical security, our infrastructure, our virtualization layer, our endpoints, and we provide identity and access management, right, for you. So we vet our employees, we make sure that they're US persons. They go through a vetting process and multiple layers in order to make sure that they're allowed access to the GovCloud region. And then there's your responsibility, right? So that's security in the cloud. And so the difference between the of the cloud and the in the cloud, right? So once you have an account, then it's your responsibility to set it up, do network configurations and security groups, firewalls, everything that you would do on-prem or in any other data center that you would be using, right? However you need to secure your environment. Account management, least privilege access. Make sense? So then, if you carry that philosophy through from security to compliance, you can say the same thing. So there's compliance of the cloud, like what do we do at AWS in terms of compliance? And then what do you need to do in terms of compliance? Is it your responsibility to get an ATO for your applications, or is it ours? Where does that line draw? So hopefully this will help you out. In terms of compliance of the cloud, like I said, we have a FedRAMP agency ACO. So we have all the FedRAMP paperwork, and you can request under NDA copies of that paperwork, so it will help you. You can inherit the controls that we have in our SSP for the FedRAMP controls. We have if you're running HIPAA workloads and you want to know how you need to control your environment and what you inherit from AWS, we have a HIPAA white paper, and that will help guide you through HIPAA workloads. We have FISMA and DICAP packages and workloads running in the GovCloud region. And we have CJIS, so if you've got law enforcement data, any criminal justice information, and you need to secure that, we also have a CJIS workbook to help you and guide you, understand what controls you would inherit from us and what we do. And then again, the DoD CSM levels 1 through 2 and 3 through 5. So that's our responsibility. And then where does your responsibility come from? Well, it's your responsibility to write your compliance documentation, document your architectures for your applications, document your network architecture, your environment, figure out where your security boundaries are, write a system security plan. And our information will help guide you through all of that or let you inherit certain controls. So hopefully that'll be easier. And all right, regulated data. So the GovCloud region was originally created. I've got some guys up here that'll come on stage in a bit, but NASA JPL came to us and said, hey, we'd really like to have a region where we could process ITAR data and really do really cool things, and you'll see in a little bit how cool they're using the cool applications that they're doing in the GovCloud region. And so we said, okay, well, we'll build this region, and we'll be able to process ITAR data. But you know what? We want this region to be able to process export control data, but other kinds of data too. And I'm going to go into that in a minute. So right now, I'm going to bring up Phil and Dan from NASA JPL, and they're going to talk about what they're doing in the GovCloud region. Come on up, you guys. Do you want to use those mics? Let me give you the clicker. Or do you want me to use mics? Okay.
All right, thank you, Karen. It's great to be here and talk about our use case in GovCloud working with ITAR sensitive data. I'm going to go ahead and have Philip introduce himself.
Yeah, Philip Southam. I am new to the public sector. I came from the last 15 years working in private sector for tech companies and using Amazon during that time. And so I brought the private sector, both experience and expectations, into JPL about 6 months ago, and I've been working with Amazon ever since.
And I'm Dan Isla. I've been at JPL for a little over 6 years now as a systems engineer and recently a data scientist working with our ITAR telemetry from the spacecraft. I'm going to tell you about our use case that we have working with the Mars Science Laboratory. This is a one-ton rover mission that we landed on the surface of Mars in 2012. And basically, I'm going to talk to you about how our engineering operations team uses the GovCloud region to do real-time data analytics for their day-to-day operations of the spacecraft. So let me walk you through their existing workflow that happened before we made it to the cloud. Basically, engineers have legacy SQL databases where the telemetry comes into, and they have to then query out this data, and usually they put it into something like Excel or MATLAB. And if anyone's ever tried to put a multi-gigabyte set of data into Excel or MATLAB, it's not a pleasant experience. And from there, they generate static plots in PowerPoint, and then email that report out to the team. Say, here's my trending report. Really? This is an example of one of the reports. This is actually looking at thermal data for the course of the mission. You can see the entire thermal cycle of Mars from its lows to its highs. And this particular plot takes almost 2 hours to multiple days to generate, depending on the complexity of the data set. So what we did very quickly with GovCloud and using EC2, EBS, and all the other features, we were able to very quickly spin up a prototype of the data. We brought our ITAR data into GovCloud and created a real-time analytics platform. I'm going to show you a video of what this platform does. So this is a web-based solution. If I can get the guys to hit the play button.
You have to hit play, Karen, or is it going to happen in the back?
I think he's going to help in the back.
And he did.
Is it playing? Can you play it from the controls?
One second.
He's working on it.
I'm going to walk you through a little bit about the development of this. Basically, what we do in our innovation process is pair a developer and an end user. So we took the thermal engineers and paired them directly with the prototyper, myself, and we built this prototype on GovCloud in less than 2 weeks. And what this lets users do is interact with telemetry streams over the course of the entire mission through a web browser in a real-time experience. So now when they're building their plots, they're generated dynamically, making queries automatically in the cloud. And then no longer do they have to create PowerPoint presentations or query data into Excel. They just send a link to their website, and others can open it up and interact with it in the same way that they built it. Here we go. So this is the interface here, and the users can just click and drag to zoom in on data and see the finest level of detail. You can see individual data points. This is thermal telemetry again. And then they can, if they want, they can zoom out to see a few hundred sols or days on Mars worth of data, or they can look at the entire Martian data set. Every time you let go of the mouse, it's making a new query. It happens in less than a second. They can hover over data, they can isolate individual streams of information, and do their analytics real time here in the browser. This is a capability that wasn't capable before. You can actually see the min and maximum trends of the data directly, hover over, and again, email the link directly to your collaborators. Just a simple RESTful link. They open up the website, and they're presented with the exact same piece of information that you had, the same view. They can then explore the data set, drill down, ask their own questions about the telemetry data set, and right-click to get even more context. So now we can see log files. We index log files in the search database on GovCloud. You can search in real time, find anomalies, compare it with the time series data set. We also brought in the images that we take on Mars, indexed with context to the telemetry information that you can view in real time to see what the rover was up to when it took a particular measurement. This is a capability that wasn't possible before with our legacy systems, and moving to GovCloud made it possible to do this. Ask questions about the data at the speed that you can think them up.
So the question
Oh.
was, what Amazon services are
What
you
Amazon
using?
services.
And we'll be touching on that in a second.
Yep. That was a great prediction for the next slide here. So what we did, a little bit of what we use in GovCloud, is we bring the data directly from the deep space network, comes from our orbiters and assets on Mars, into our ETL, our extract, transform, and load process. This is in GovCloud, and we're utilizing S3 for storage, as well as the SQS and SNS. Those are the simple queue service and simple notification service to actually trigger when data should come in. So it's all event-driven and processed. And then we're utilizing some open source technologies, and specifically like Socket.io and Spark and some of the Hadoop pieces. That goes into our search index, and then it's available on the web. So by the time data comes directly from Mars and lands in the GovCloud, within less than a minute, our engineers can now interact with it and share it in real time. So now I'm going to have Phil talk a little bit more about the stack that we built.
Sure.
Do that.
So, as I mentioned, I'm fresh to JPL, and one of the things that took me by surprise was when I got there was not the secret briefings I read on aliens or what happened on the dark side of the moon, but how much legacy applications and how much legacy infrastructure we had, and how difficult it traditionally was for us to be able to come up with an idea like this, iterate, and execute on it in such a short amount of time. The other sort of shocking thing was, and I love what Amazon's done with GovCloud, but I mean, there's not necessarily the same feature parity on GovCloud as there is with traditional public cloud, and that's something that they keep improving year by year. But oftentimes, as developers, we're impatient and we want the latest and greatest thing now. So we had to improvise a bit with some of that stuff, and so the architecture that we came up with, you could do this in pub cloud with some of the traditional Amazon services like their container service and with cloud search, but since none of that stuff was available in GovCloud, we had to sort of roll our own. So we, for the database engine and for the sort of visualization layers, the backend stuff was all done with Elasticsearch and a lot of front-end development in JavaScript. How this stuff is running, how it's orchestrated, how we're able to sort of iterate rapidly is we're using containerization and Mesosphere as sort of the orchestration layer for containerization, which basically means that from an ops perspective, all I have to do as a sysadmin is have a homogeneous environment. I don't need to worry about what version of Java is running. I don't need to worry about what version of Python is running. I just basically set up a containerization hosting platform. At that point, my developers can then build their containers and ship them, and we can deploy them on a pool of resources. A node goes down, big deal. The scheduler moves it someplace else. We have also integrated with, we also did some custom development where we integrated with some of the API calls in Mesos so that anytime there is an event, a load balancer gets updated, and so that like if I have a node go down or if I want to scale up to 5 endpoints rather than 3 endpoints, our load balancer automatically sort of gets provisioned with the latest and greatest updates without any downtime. Another thing I want to touch on is, I think Karen did a really good job in explaining that security on the actual architecture or on the cloud is our responsibility, especially since a lot of these applications in the GovCloud may have reached back into your own environment, whereas in the pub cloud you might not have that. And so one of the things that we liked about using the containerization architecture is that we can now have sandboxing and isolation with technologies like SE Linux so that we can actually have sort of a least authority so that the weakest link in all of your architecture, in all of your security plans is that one developer that basically just copied and pasted something online and didn't really realize the implications of it. And so now, if your application developers aren't as, let's say, security savvy or tech savvy as the rest of your ops team, you can sort of mitigate the damage with, an infiltration can be with basically trying to isolate it in a container versus, having entire VMs being architectures or stacks being exfiltrated. So that is some of the stuff that we did. Another thing I want to touch on is currently right now S3 is not, at least in our setup, was not set up so that there's a sort of data localization. So for us, when an EC2 instance or any sort of instance within GovCloud needs to make an S3 call in PubCloud, that's done within the sort of the Amazon low latent private network. In our instance, we've got to sort of trombone out and go through our VPN and then come back in. So what we did to mitigate that is we set up a Hadoop layer for that was running HDFS to basically bring in for our large data sets data locality, so that for our high volume Spark jobs or high volume querying jobs that we need to sort of transform raw data, we don't have or we don't pay the price for slow transport coming in and also long latency. So we bring that in. So the moral of the story is that just because not all of the latest and greatest features are on GovCloud, you can still, with a little creativity, you can still actually bring that cycle of innovation into GovCloud and do some pretty amazing things with it.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much. And you guys, Philip and Dan will be around at the end of the presentation, so you guys can ask them some questions, yeah? Oh, thanks. All right, so cool, yeah, they're doing really cool things, and we're like, we want you guys to do just as cool things or mission critical applications as well. And so the GovCloud region was built to handle all kinds of regulated workloads, and we look to the controlled unclassified information in those workloads, like nuclear or law enforcement, agriculture, copyright. We have workloads from customers in all areas doing all things, financial industry, healthcare industry, IP, et cetera. And then the big question is, well, what are they doing, right? So now I've got this regulated data, what am I doing with it? In some cases, running websites, maybe doing backup recovery, archiving their data, disaster recovery, those are the simple ones. Devon Test, that's pretty easy. I was pretty impressed when I came to AWS almost 3 years ago, and I came from a team of developers. I was a chief engineer, and we had like 20 developers, and everybody had their own stack, their own dev stack. It was like a Oracle rack and WebLogic, and it was a pretty heavy stack, and it would take a couple weeks to build it. And using AWS, whether you're in GovCloud or not in GovCloud, Dev Test is build this gold standard stack, use a CloudFormation template, bring it up in the morning when your devs come in, bring it down in the evening when they're done, and you didn't have to purchase all that hardware. So for me, it was like a no-brainer, right? Big data processing, like these guys are doing, high performance computing. We have a number of customers who are bursting out of their own HPC environments into GovCloud, running workloads, bringing them up, shutting them down. So we like to see that. And we're starting to see enterprise IT. So we've got customers that are shutting down their data centers and moving all in to GovCloud, which is great to see as well. So just the swath of and the breadth of applications, from websites to shutting down your data centers and bringing them in. All right. So, okay, now we've told you about, what GovCloud is about, who can gain access to it, the types of data that you can process in the region, the workloads that are happening in the region. Now you may say, well, who's using it? Well, first, let me say it's being used by a lot of people, and we're pretty excited about our growth. In the 3 years that this chart represents, we've had incredible growth, and I think if you were in the keynote, you saw this chart, as Teresa probably said the same thing, 273% average year over year. So yeah, federal, state, and local agencies in the government, across the government, are using the region. But you'd also be surprised, educational institutions and research organizations, and then private industry are coming into the region. Private industry has regulated data as well. And then our AWS partners. So we have many resellers that sell in GovCloud. We have consulting partners that if you're an end customer and you're not quite sure how to get started, they will help you get started. We have SaaS providers, and we have a whole a session, I think, tomorrow afternoon on, if you're an ISV or a SaaS provider, how to sell your software in GovCloud. And then technology partners, which are ISVs and people providing technology. At the moment, the marketplace, AWS Marketplace, is where you can do one-click purchase of software into other regions, is not yet integrated in the GovCloud region, but that doesn't mean that there's not software available. So you just have to figure out how to discover it. So we want you guys to discover it. We want ISVs to figure out how to sell it. And so you can come to our session tomorrow afternoon. All right, so how do I get access, right? Well, the next session we're going to be doing is what are the requirements, how to get started. And so that's kind of like the next question, teeing up for the next session. So a couple things. One is we've got 4 sessions on GovCloud. This is the overview. Then immediately following this is how to get started. And then tomorrow afternoon is a deep dive into compliance. So if you're interested in FedRAMP, FISMA, DoD, you've got HIPAA workloads, you've got CJIS workloads, you're just curious about anything in terms of security and compliance, you can come to that session in the afternoon. And then the last session of the day is how to sell software in the region. So how to bring the software in, and then how do I discover it? How do I figure out it's there? So I really just at this point I just want to open up to questions because I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions and give you our contact information. And it's hard to see, but if you've got questions out there, maybe raise your hand and maybe we can have a traveling microphone. Want to come up? Oh, I can see everybody here. I just can't see everybody here.
I'll grab you next. Hello.
Hi.
So I have a question on security. You had mentioned earlier that you are responsible for security of the cloud. When incidents happen, security incidents specifically, how does a client work with you in order to get more information on things that may or may not have touched upon your responsibilities? And the second question to that is, if there is follow-up action such as deletion of information, auditing, forensics, et cetera, how would a client contact you and get that information?
Right, so it's the standard way, the GovCloud region operates in the same way as the other regions. So if there's, for example, if there's a security or a vulnerability that we know about, we do notifications. And then, if it's a security incident, are you asking if it's a security incident in your application?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's detected as a security incident. What is the response capabilities of Amazon when
Right.
it touches upon your responsibility?
Yeah, so I don't have that answer right here, but I'll have to get back to you on that. I mean, I think it depends how your application is secured. We have a security white paper that talks about your responsibilities in encrypting your data. For example, no classified data should be in AWS at all, in the GovCloud region at all. And so that there's a specific security incident in regard to that. Yeah, so we'll get back to you.
Hi, my customer is the Department of Defense, and I wanted to know whether you know of any production deployments within Amazon on the security levels 3 through 5.
So the 3 through 5 is a provisional ATO, and they're working on pilots right now. I'd encourage you to come to the session tomorrow afternoon, a deep dive in compliance, because our compliance team will be here, and they can talk about what's happening in the DoD CSM realm and our move to SRG. Yeah.
Yeah, my basic question is about the evolution of your service catalog.
Okay.
As we show throughout the years, is it pretty much kind of an obvious thing. You're taking surveys through your key civilian and DoD customers, and they're driving that service catalog.
Right, so good question. So how do new services come into the
I got a
GovCloud
follow-up.
region? So you'll see that new services are generally launched in US regions, maybe US East, maybe US East and West. And kind of what the trend is a new service will be launched. We'll get all kinds of feedback from customers. We'll innovate on that service and add new features, improve on what we've got. And then the next phase will be region expansion. And so then how do we decide at AWS to expand and to which regions is based on customer feedback, customer demand in each region, and the need for the service. So yes, exactly what you're saying.
And then that follows up with the second question, because I'm involved right now with HPC customers, and there's certain services I don't see there now, and trying to figure out what the investment is to get these things into the catalog and FedRAMP, things like Route 53, Direct Connect.
Right. So Route 53 is a global service. It won't be coming into the GovCloud region, but you can use global services with your resources in GovCloud. So Route 53, which is our DNS server, and CloudFront, which distributes the content, globally, you can use with resources in GovCloud. There is a direct connect into GovCloud. You can use Direct Connect to any US colo facility, and then it will go through the AWS backbone using inter-region charges to get to GovCloud. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, do you recommend government agencies all use GovCloud, or some scenarios where they can use East and West?
I'm sorry, do we recommend?
Do you recommend like potential government agencies all use GovCloud, or there are some scenarios where they can use East and West?
Yeah, there are some scenarios where you can use East and West. I mean, it's really all about your data and your comfort level, and then your need. Like Dan and Philip said, they had some services that they wish were in GovCloud, but they found workarounds. And so that was okay. They have a definite need to process their data within the region. Public websites, I don't see that you need to put those in the region. And so it's really a comfort level on your part. Is it appropriate for this data to be in the region? Yeah.
Anecdotally, from our perspective, we do have workloads and use cases where we are using GovCloud extensively because of the amount of capacity that's available in GovCloud. So the amount of capacity that's in GovCloud versus GovCloud is you get a lot more essentially. We also try to leverage the spot market so that we can actually pay a lower compute charge for some of our batch operations or data workloads. So it's a great way to help cut cost if you don't have the regulatory restrictions in terms of ITAR, EAR, or anything else like that. If you can get away with it, PubCloud, it works well. It may actually be more cost effective for you. And like I said, if it's a high volume HPC sort of thing, you probably will run into less problems with quotas or running out of capacity in the regions over there. No, Karen could probably talk better to this, but it's a supply and demand issue, right? So I don't think there's enough volatility and enough extra capacity in GovCloud in order to be able to justify a spot market. Right.
So you mentioned that there is no industry that plays in the same environment as the GovCloud, like education and other.
Yes.
So as a government agency coming into this environment, that's the biggest resistance that we have in evaluating this environment for the coexistence of data.
Okay.
So what do you have as a confidence builder to a government agency stepping into this GovCloud that I can use to, expand my confidence level.
So the question, I think, is I'm nervous about having my data with other organizations. I may be a government agency, and I want my data and my traffic to just be with other government agencies and not private industry. So the virtual private cloud gives you network separation from any other customer. VPC is in GovCloud, but it's also in all other regions. And then if you have a big concern about compute, you can purchase or use dedicated instances. So that means that you alone are a single tenant on a box for every instance that you have. You would not share any compute. Yeah.
The interoperability is what I was sorry. The interoperability was the advantage that I was looking at when I saw GovCloud. But I mean, of course, there's always the option of going into virtual private cloud, but I just wanted to see if you had any way of showing us how you are compartmentalized within this, within the GovCloud.
Right, so every customer within GovCloud is compartmentalized. Their data, all of their compute, whether it's EC2 instances, whether it's an RDS instance, is running within their VPC, and you can further differentiate by running on dedicated instances, so your compute is not shared, is not on a multi-tenant environment.
So we'll do one more question, Karen.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question on the FedRAMP certification. I did notice that the RDS service, one of the basic services, is part of your GovCloud offering.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not certified by the FedRAMP. Is there any date that you expecting that certification to come in?
So RDS, yes, is a service in the GovCloud region, but is not yet part of our FedRAMP package at all in AWS. And so the order in which we onboard new services to FedRAMP is based on customer demand and your asks, and it's been a huge ask. I'd say come to our compliance deep dive, and you can get it from the compliance team. I think they're doing a session today, but then they're also doing one specific to GovCloud tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for Dan or Philip? All right, thank you very much.